All right, hello. This is Elizabeth Holt, Digital Initiatives Librarian. Today I am presenting on data preservation, the 3-2-1 rule, and more. This presentation is being recorded. So today I'll be looking at what data preservation considerations are, the format, storage, and risks to data, the 3-2-1 rule, and more, and then a quick wrap up with a slide for the resources. So when we're talking about data preservation, first we are talking about our data. So what do I have? Where do I have it? And how long do I need to keep it? As far as what do I have, I'm first looking at the format. Is it paper or is it electronic? I'm also looking at access controls. Do I need to control access to this? Does it belong to me, or is it actually for a department or a team? Am I sharing this? Am I not? Is it sensitive or important enough to need a guaranteed backup somewhere, either off-site or offline? And where do I have it? Can I access it remotely? Do I even need to? Is it safe? Be that from weather, from cyber threats, or from accidental loss? Is it accessible to those that need it? Or is it safe from those that shouldn't have access? And looking at how long do I need to keep this? Is this something I'm creating for me? Am I creating it for a class or a presentation? Or am I creating it as a role that I have within a group for a department or a team? And will that group need access after I've exited the role? What else? Is it a rough draft? Should I keep it because it may serve as a helpful record? Or maybe by keeping it, might be creating a confusing version of the file, especially if others are going to have access to it. So now we're going to look at the data formats and storage options. I've broken it down basically into analog and digital. So analog, we're just looking at paper, we're looking at audio cassettes or video cassettes that might still be lying around. When you're looking at digital, it's either born digital, which is the documents and the files you're creating on your workstation or your computer, the images you're creating with your phone or Zoom recordings. And then there's digitized options. So that's when you're taking your analog item and converting it to an electronic version. I think we all know this. You're scanning your paper and saving them as a PDF. You're scanning photos and saving them as JPEGs. Converting your microcassette of notes into MP3 files, that kind of thing. And then looking at data storage. So that can be your file cabinet at your garage back home. It might be your desk drawer. Maybe it's the hard drive on the laptop or the computer that you're creating the documents on. Of course, there are external hard drives. Here's like a USB stick or the more higher capacity passport style hard drive. And then, of course, here at LSU Health, we've got the network drive. That's essentially a large hard drive that we all connect to. It's connectable via the institutional network. And then as well, we have the option of the cloud storage, which is a big data center somewhere in the US. LSU Health uses Microsoft OneDrive, so it's Microsoft that manages all of our data centers. I understand that Microsoft likes to minimize risk by having data centers in multiple locations all around the US, and our OneDrive storage will be scattered amongst those different data centers. So when you're talking about preservation, you're talking about avoiding risk. And so let's look at some risks to data. There's obsolescence, there's loss, and then there's threats. So eventually, most all technology will become obsolete. We know this by looking at the humble floppy disk, which was very popular at one time and is now obsolete. So along with that floppy disk, the the operating system that would read it has become obsolete. The hardware that you would use to connect it to your computer is obsolete. So those are some examples. And then operating systems become obsolete. They might upgrade, or rather update, or they might just be, say, purchased by a rival and buried. So any information or data on those operating systems, are at risk once that update happens or if it becomes obsolete. And then there are platform migration, either by, again, upgrading or being acquired by a competitor. And so any data that you've stored on that platform risk becoming obsolete when that platform ages out. Now, looking at loss. So it can be pretty simple. Your laptop battery has died before you've saved a record, saved your document. Or a power outage occurs before you've had a chance to save. What else? There's data degradation. So data can degrade while being stored on a hard drive or on what's called a solid state storage drive, which is the more common sort of network server storage situation. And then there's user error, right? So closing a document without saving it, or if you're on a shared computer, someone might restart it while others have open documents on it. And now we're looking at threat. So environment, that's, not just weather events. While it is weather events, but it's not just weather events. It can also be something like dust or dirt. And so that's also something to think about with the data centers. Like I said, Microsoft hosts our data centers and tries to minimize the risk by having them, these centers in a variety of locations. And so that's a way to not risk exposing all of your data to one geographical risk, like one area that tends to have tornadoes or one area that tends to have wildfires. Or so if you spread those data centers across different risk zones, then you minimize the chance of losing everything to one event. All right, looking at cyber threats. So of course there are cyber threats to the institutional network. There are also cyber threats to those data centers. And just the more that we're uploading our information and sharing our data across the internet, the more it's at risk to cyber attack. And another threat is non-compliance. So say your department has protocols or your organization has protocols to store data or share it, and you're just kind of putting that off. You're delaying, say you took the minutes, but you haven't printed it or shared it yet, and they're just kind of there as a file in your computer. And then perhaps you procrastinate to the point that you're no longer in that role. And so that level of non-compliance is a threat to the data that other people are counting on having. All right, I'm going to talk about the 3-2-1 rule. So 3-2-1 have 3 copies. So that means 1 original and 2 backups. You want to have them on at least 2 storage sites. So for example, save 1 copy on your workstation network and another to an external drive or to the OneDrive. I will say real quick that because our institutional network has several different drives, you have the T drive and you also have your sort of personally assigned O drive. If you're saving 1 to the O and then 1 to the T, those are 2 locations, but technically they are susceptible to the same risk since eventually they're on the same server. And then finally, include 1 offsite location in those 2 storage sites. So the OneDrive satisfies that requirement, or if you print up a copy and take it back to your, that file cabinet in the garage, technically that would count. However, that file cabinet has its own risks of losing the data. And so, all right, so that's the 3-2-1 rule. So here's a fun little example of that. Say you've created a document and it's there on your workstation, and you immediately print a copy of that because you know you're going to have to share it. And then you also just make a backup copy. And now we need our two, so that makes your 3 copies of the one item. And now at least 2 storage areas. So if you save it to the network and then you also save it to the OneDrive, there that satisfies your 2 storage sites and 1 being offsite. And say you're doing this for a department or for an organization, you've printed up a copy, you put in the file cabinet so that everyone that needs access has access. So now the and more is the 3-2-1-1-0 rule. And this is a little bit of an upgrade. It's, let's see, you've got your 3 copies, at least 2 storage sites. The 1 is off-site, so that's the same as our 3-2-1 rule. In this, you're also going to have 1 offline. So that's for particularly sensitive data or information that you need to make sure you have a backup in case of a cyber attack or a significant situation affecting a data center where it's being stored. So if you just really want to make sure you have access to it, go ahead and keep it in a hard drive or in a paper copy. I should say an external hard drive. And then the 0 for 3-2-1-1-0 is means 0 errors in recoverability. So this is more of a marketing tool for digital repositories and data preservation specialists. And these are groups that will store your data and then run tests pretty much constantly to ensure recoverability. And so they count that as a standard to meet. It's not really a standard that we're worried about when we're meeting our day-to-day data preservation or file management considerations. All right, the NDSA is the National Digital Stewardship Alliance. This is their handy 4 levels of digital preservation. So we've kind of switched from data to digital data. They're not really talking about paper copies. They're talking about sort of large digital collections. This would be for like a department or the school looking at their data collections. These would be some of the steps and standards. So first it would be to know. You want to have 2 copies in separate locations. You really want to control access, make sure that there are locks on files if there need to be. You'll do a virus check on them and then create an inventory. The next level up from that would be to protect. So now we're looking at 3 copies. And you're looking at a different geographic location. So if you're working with a team in Baton Rouge or Shreveport, make sure that they have a copy of all the updated files, and therefore that satisfies the different geographic location. Of course, you're really watching your metadata, and you're making sure that that metadata transfers whenever you're making copies or moving files. Monitoring, so 3 copies, and now you're looking at a different disaster threat zone. And so kind of looking out of the Gulf Coast, saving and making sure a data center is up in Virginia or Arizona, something to that extent. And you're documenting all any changes, and you're really upping your metadata standards. And then finally, when you're sustaining a digital preservation plan, you're going to have 2 different threat zones. You're going to have plans to address obsolescence and replacing content, and then creating a schedule to audit. I think the standard is every 5 years. And here's a handy checklist that they've created. If you are wanting to do sort of a systematic review of your data preservation considerations and where you're at, it includes those 4 standards. but I think for most of our needs, just that first one, maybe into the second one is necessary. It is looking at where you're storing it, the data integrity, who has access, if you're controlling access, if you're controlling the metadata, and then controlling the content. And it's just kind of a simple, I haven't started yet, I'm working on it, and yes, I have achieved that. So in conclusion, data preservation, you're considering what you have, where you have it, and how long you'll need it when you're establishing your data preservation strategies. The 3-2-1 rule is to create 3 versions, that's the original plus 2 backups. Save the files across at least 2 different storage options. Make sure one of those storage options is off-site. And then if it's very sensitive data, also keep one version offline. So that's either an external hard drive or a paper copy. So the National Digital Stewardship Alliance has several resources. And then here, the backblaze.com is a sort of a data or digital preservation company, and they have some excellent resources on these different rules of approaching data preservation. And then I first took a workshop on this back in 2025 at the Southern Mississippi Institutional Repositories Conference. So a little shout out to Elizabeth there at the University of Southern Mississippi. Well, thank you very much for attending this presentation. I hope you have found it helpful. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. There's a presentation feedback form and then a QR code to our library's Instagram page.